Brew like a pro. 3 common coffee errors solved. That's what we're gonna be talking about right now. Some of the things that really help us know what we're doing with our coffee is that what's the game plan? What are we really trying to do here? I think that's gonna be the most important thing as we go through this. I know this may sound kind of crazy, like we're thinking about a game plan for coffee, which is like, why? It's coffee, it's something we just drink and we move on. It is, and that's true. However, don't you realize that we can probably make our cup of coffee even better without not even leaving the house, but just changing a couple of things in our routine? So we're gonna talk about 3 things. The first one is cleanliness, brew temperature, and the third one is what is it? Coffee to water ratio. Those 3 things, okay? This is a coffee maker. This is a Hario B60. I'm guilty of this too. You can see how dirty this is. Let's see if it's gonna focus. There we go. You can see how dirty this is. This is gross. If you're using like a single cup and you put it on top of the coffee, and what happens at times is that when you're brewing your coffee, it goes inside, the coffee tends to bounce against the water or the coffee that's inside. So now you have this old coffee right here, and it's mixing in with your coffee, so that can tend to not give you the best cup of coffee. It's interesting how we care about the freshness of the coffee. We care about like brewing it in a certain way, using different types of waters in order to bring the best out of coffees. And when we neglect our coffee gear, we don't realize that we're affecting the way the coffee tastes too. So clean your gear every other day, something like that, depending on what it is. If it's like a Mr. Coffee automatic drip machine, probably you want to descale it. If you use it all the time, 1 to 2 weeks or so, you can stretch it out, but don't go too crazy with the stretching, because this is what's going to happen. You're not going to have a good cup of coffee and you're going to be wondering, is it the beans? Are the beans really crappy? So those are some of the things that you can do. This is the first thing, okay? I know it's kind of weird that I'm talking about cleaning your gear, but it's extremely important. Not just coffee gear. It can be like either a stirrer or mixer that you're using, even like the carafe that you're using. We have to descale that stuff too. We want to taste and enjoy our cup of coffee. So that's what we're gonna be doing, okay? Number 2 may be interesting too. So, okay, we got coffee right here, right? And we have water over there. A lot of times when I talk to people, especially people who know or use like a coffee to water ratio, if they know it that way, or some other people may use like a cup to tablespoon ratio, okay, when they're using like an automatic drip machine. It's interesting how people have different ratios for coffee. Like me personally, I like a 1 to 15 ratio. 1 to 15 ratio is pretty cool just because it gives me the greatness of both worlds, meaning that I like a strong cup, but I do want to taste what I'm actually tasting. Like a lot of times what we say is the clarity in the cup. Like we can decipher actually what we're tasting. And 1 to 15 does that for me, but it's strong enough to where I feel like I'm drinking coffee. I don't want to be drinking tea. I don't know about you, but I don't care for tea like that. I don't want it to taste like tea. And one of the ways you taste tea is that it's kind of weak. Just my preference, but you may feel the same way, you may not. So what is your ratio? Some people like a 1 to 18 ratio. To me, I don't really care for that. Sometimes I'll do a 1 to 10 ratio. And again, that depends on the coffee. The coffee can dictate a lot of this, meaning that now we have this coffee, we see that it's a medium or a darker roast. So that's where I will tend to do a 1 to 15 ratio. However, depending on the light roast, I probably go a little bit stronger, 1 to 10 ratio, just because I know that coffee will have a hard time actually extracting. So these are the parameters that you're dealing with. Look at your bag, figure out what you're doing. And again, we're talking about game plan. Game plan is extremely important here. I know, again, we're talking about coffee and game plan. It doesn't make sense. Just make the damn coffee and move on. That's true. But at the end of the day, we're trying to make the best cup of coffee that we can for that moment in time. You know, dialing in is all about your preference and also that coffee. Pairing those two up together, that's really what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to do each and every time. And these 3 parameters, those are the things that we're trying to accomplish. Okay, so again, know your ideal ratio. You know it. If you like it too strong or you like it a little bit weak, if you're going to be doing creamer, probably want it to be a little bit stronger. Judge it based off your preference and also what coffee that you're using, if it's fruity, if it's not fruity. If you want to taste a little bit more of it, go to 115. If you don't taste it enough, go to 110. those are some of the things that you can work on in order to do your best when you're making your cup of coffee. All right, let's talk about the last one. The last one, I wouldn't say it's controversial. People kind of go back and forth between it, but let's talk about it right now. We're gonna go to the kettle because that's what we're gonna deal with. Okay, here's the kettle. This is the kettle I've been using for many, many years. This is a kettle. The reason why I like it so much is that it allows me to get the temperature that I want exactly. I will say that it's probably best to fill it at least halfway to make sure that it's as accurate as possible. It has a little needle at the bottom to let the kettle know what's the ideal temperature based off the configurations that I've selected. And at times, I go between 180, as low as 180, and as high as 205. I haven't played around that much with 212 lately, just because I think I'm finding the coffees working really well between that range that I give. However, there's also association, Society of Specialty Coffee Association, something like that, SCA. But they also have another SCA, Sports Car Club America. Don't go to that one, go to the specialty one if you want to know. They recommend between 195 to 205. Again, that's helpful. That's a good way to go about starting drinking your coffee. And again, these are parameters that you could play with, trying to dial in our coffee. And the most critical part about dialing in our coffee is balancing it out the correct way. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to extract the coffee. We don't want to extract it too much to the point to where it gets too bitter and it's hard to decipher exactly what we're tasting or even what your roaster has put on those bags. Or we don't extract enough, especially what happens with light roast, is that if the temperature is too low, it becomes a lot sour and you can't really taste what you're supposed to be tasting in that cup of coffee because you haven't extracted enough of the coffee. Ideally, what they say is that you're supposed to be in between 18 to 22%. And again, that kind of depends on your grinder and also how hot your water is, also your ratio that you're dealing with. Because if it's a stronger dose, like a 1-to-10 ratio, it's easier to extract because you're using less water for that amount of coffee. So it's extremely important that we play around with grind size depending on what we're tasting in the coffee. If you can't do that, that's fine. Let's just say that you do have a kettle that doesn't have available temperature. What you can do is, if you have a kettle that just boils to the 212 mark, is that you can go to 212, wait a minute or two, let the water cool down. And as you do that, what's gonna happen is that it's gonna be at a lower temperature. If you wanna wait a little bit more, you can operate at an even lower temperature. Those are little things that you can do. So I think it's best that you kind of play around with that. And again, it depends on your preference and depends on the coffee that you're using. So take that into consideration. So those are the tips that I have for you. Those are the things that I believe that are critical for you to make some good tasting coffee. There are some more things that you can probably do in order to make a good cup of coffee. But let's start with those. And if you have any more questions, just let me know. I'll talk to you later. Bye.